session on Raider training. My name is Sabrina De Almeida. I'm the Director of Talent Development and Diversity Initiatives in the Office of Human Resources, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Adam Taylor, our Director of Compensation. Adam studied industrial psychology, which had a heavy focus on performance management, and throughout his career, he has always held roles that have incorporated performance management into them. So he brings us a wealth of experience on today's topic. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Adam.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sabrina. So in today's session on performance management, we're going to be discussing topics on rating accuracy, bias, types of rating errors, and then we'll talk for a few minutes about fairness in the performance management process. After the recording today, we're hoping that you'll be able to understand how setting goals and establishing very clear performance objectives and behavioral expectations will reduce bias in the performance management process. And we'll give you some strategies to support and acknowledge in addressing bias through very clear goal outcomes. So rating accuracy. When we talk about accuracy in the performance management process, a supervisor's ability to provide accurate ratings really depends on their ability to extract appropriate, relevant, and accurate information about an employee's performance. This can be very difficult at times. You think about all the professional employees that we have in the organization. In today's workplace, managers don't stand over employees' shoulders and see every single thing that it is that they do. So how do they extract appropriate and accurate information about performance in that context? Then their ability to ignore irrelevant information, like how do they sift through all of the noise that may be impacting ratings? And then finally, how do they draw reliable and valid inferences about staff behavior? How does one recognize when exemplary behavior occurs, and so that they can accurately rate that consistently, reliably over and over? And I think you notice I said behavior a lot. At the end of the day, performance is behavior. If I had $1 for every time my professor said that, I could have paid for grad school. But it's very true. When we talk about performance management, the focus should be on the specific employee behaviors that they exhibit on a day-to-day basis. So let's take a few minutes and talk about different forms of rating error that we see take place. Central tendency, very common one. For whatever reason, the manager, maybe they don't want to create conflict among employees, so they rate everyone right down the middle. We call that central tendency. Leniency may be where the manager gives everyone higher ratings than are actually warranted. Again, there's lots of reasons why this could take place. The error is essentially evaluating performance higher than it truly is. The opposite of that would be severity. The manager has unrealistically high expectations that none of the employees can meet, and all of the staff members are given artificially low ratings than are truly warranted. The halo or horn effect. So essentially we are making generalizations about overall performance based on one or two characteristics. So maybe an employee, part of their job is to produce Excel reports, and another part of their job is to create newsletters and marketing content. So if the employee does really, really, really well with Excel reports, but they don't do very well with marketing, they struggle with that. If they're given high ratings, then maybe that the manager's understanding or appreciation for their ability to do those great Excel reports is influencing their overall rating. Then lastly, I think a common issue that we see more often is with recency. So the performance evaluations are largely based on recent events, things that have happened in the recent past. And that's largely because, maybe good notes weren't taken throughout the year to really capture the employee's performance across the entire 12-month period. And next, I'm going to ask Sabrina to take a few minutes to talk about some forms of bias that we see.
Thanks, Adam. One of the most difficult aspects in the performance appraisal process has to do with bias. A bias is defined as a prejudice in favor of or against someone or something. And it should go without saying that employees expect their performance evaluations to be fair and free of bias. And whether we realize it or not, our brain has a natural tendency to sort information into groups in order to process it easier. And this can lead us to make snap judgments about a person without even realizing it. Rating is based on the judgments of the rater rather than the ratee. And when one person's unconscious bias is applied to performance appraisals, it can lead to inaccuracy, favoritism, and even unfair treatment. So here are some common rating errors and biases that can impact performance ratings. Confirmation bias is where you search for information to make yourself right. First impression bias, the saying goes, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Affinity bias is that unconscious preference for people like you. And implicit bias, I'm sure many of you have heard different definitions for this one, but implicit bias is that unconscious attribution of particular qualities to a member of a certain group. And now I'll turn it back over to you, Adam.
Thank you, Sabrina. So while it's very important for us to understand the different forms of rating errors and biases that exist, there's actually a wealth of research out there that says, training on just that isn't effective at improving accuracy and performance ratings, that we have to take it a step further, that we have to establish very clear behavior anchors, scales, or frame of references so that we can clearly identify and articulate what those different levels of performance look like. And then when we have those anchors in place, that it actually helps with improving recall and it improves with rating reliability. So we have an activity planned for our session, our training session tomorrow. And essentially what we're going to do is split the room into 3 different groups and talk about a common job that maybe we're familiar with, academic advisor. And when we think about the function of academic advising, we're going to ask the group to come up with what are those behaviors that we're looking for. What does exceeding expectation look like in the context of the academic advisor, or what is not meeting expectations? And just as a quick example, maybe we're thinking about note-taking. Maybe exceeding expectation is keeping track of when the advisor is meeting with the student, that they're keeping very detailed notes and they're putting that in the file so that if another advisor were to pick up that file, they could follow those notes very clearly and they can see the conversation that had happened before. And maybe not meeting expectation is the manager observes that when the advisor is meeting with students, they never take notes. There's no evidence of notes in the files, etc. But again, we're talking about developing very clear examples of behaviors to illustrate what we're looking for across the performance dimensions. We're going to have some resources available. We'll talk about where to find those at the end of the session, but we have our SMART goal template that managers can reference to describe the different competencies and goal outcomes of what exceeding or what meeting or does not meet expectation looks like. And those resources available on our HR portal with A Successful You. So tips to improve recall. So we noticed that it's important when you think about performance, the performance cycle being 12 months, 12 months long. How do we improve recall so that the managers can keep track of all of the performance that's taken place throughout the year? Keep notes, create an employee file and keep notes of those observed job behaviors that you see. For example, if you get an email from a dean saying, hey, your employee did a really, really good job helping me with this project, you can save that email, print it out, and put it in their folder to keep notes of how the employee created a raving fan, and that's exceeding your expectations, etc. We have functionality in A Successful You in the performance management system. Under the performance tab on the team overview, you can actually type in supervisory notes throughout the year to kind of keep your notes consolidated in the system as you observe and document that behavior that you want to make a note of. And we recommend that you have regular ongoing meetings with the employees. Revisit those performance objectives. Priorities and things shift throughout the year. So sometimes we need to modify those goals as we move along. But it's important that we give that ongoing feedback about the employee's performance to tell them how they're doing, building confidence, addressing needs so that they can be successful in their role. The key is ongoing two-way dialogue, frequent as you can. Now we're going to shift and talk for a couple minutes about perceptions of fairness versus rating accuracy. I grew up watching Star Trek with my dad. He loved watching the old Star Trek shows, and I've seen all the movies several times. And as I was preparing for the training today, thinking about this topic of fairness, I recalled a clip from a movie, one of the movies, where Captain Kirk is literally being held accountable. He's standing trial for, we'll call it, bad performance of some of his crew members. And it made me kind of realize that more often than not, managers, they take ownership and responsibility for some of the performance shortfalls with their staff. I think we've all heard or we've read in some leadership training or training books, etc., that part of our responsibilities as effective managers is to make sure our employees understand the expectations, that they have all the tools and the resources and the training, the equipment, the things that they need to do their job effectively, right? That's part of our job as being managers, is to empower and equip our staff. But when our staff fall short, we start to rationalize that those shortcomings are our fault because we didn't properly equip them and empower them. And as a result of those feelings, supervisors give inaccurate ratings. The fact of the matter is the employee actually didn't meet the objective, but because we're taking that ownership and the responsibility for not effectively equipping them, we give them inaccurate ratings for the sake of being fair. Any thoughts about that, Sabrina?
Well, this is a great question and a great topic. Is being fair more important than being accurate? And I think that there are probably a lot of different views on that. And when I think about that, I really try to think about what makes the most sense in a particular work environment and between the relationship of the supervisor and the employee.
That's a great point, Sabrina. We don't have the time to really fully vet this particular subject, but I can tell you that there is a body of research out there that would say that perceptions of fairness is more important than rating accuracy, and that all it really depends on a lot of different factors, as Sabrina mentioned. But ultimately, if we have accurate ratings, you tend to have, you increase the probability of having higher perceptions of fairness with the employee. But it's definitely something, there's a balance there. It's something that you have to think about. Each situation will be different. But at the end of the day, when you're having that two-way dialogue throughout the year and you're asking your employee, do you have everything that you need? Is there anything that you need from me? Are there any barriers or obstacles in the way that I need to remove? If you're having that open two-way dialogue, you can be sure that you've done what you've needed to do as a manager to empower the employee to do their work. Performance management is an important aspect of the human resources employment life cycle. There's lots of benefits when this is done right. When supervisors are having that ongoing dialogue and those conversations with their employees, they gain invaluable insights about their staff. They understand better their strengths so that they can leverage them in different projects and things that are going on. They can also understand, areas of opportunities where the employee needs some help with some training, some additional resources that help them improve in areas. Managers can take the opportunity to clarify, the university goals, tying the work that the employee does to our different strategic initiatives so that they understand how their work fits within the larger scope of what we're trying to accomplish as a university. It enhances motivation and commitment with the employee when they're having that dialogue and they're understanding those connections. And a lot of the things that I've talked about, if you subscribe to Gallup's model of employee engagement, when the employees understand what's expected, when they have the tools and the equipment that they need to do their job, when they have opportunities to learn and grow and develop, and they understand how their work fits within the larger picture, those are all important elements of employee engagement. And when employees are engaged, they're happier, they're healthier, they're more productive, and they help further the mission of the university. So we have a lot of resources available for you on this topic. On the portal, under A Successful You, on the left-hand side of the screen, there's an entire section dedicated to performance management tools that are available for you to use. And always, if you have any questions about anything that you can't find, or if you just need to talk with someone about specific situations, you can reach out to the performance team using the asuccessfulu@american.edu email. We appreciate your time today. Thank you for listening. We hope that this has been helpful. And again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions on performance management.
Thanks so much, and we look forward to talking to you real soon.